Mr. Van Norman.
Part of my conversation I had this past week with the senator's aide was on issues that Mr. Corman brought up, and other issues where we have done in the past is tried to only do the areas when people resign or retired. This one, as we knew, this year would come around if there was going to be a hit, as I explained to the rep, that we're now, as we said once before, we get into the meat of everything. He didn't understand what I was talking about. When I explained to him what our budget was, how many kids we were going to be in a classroom this next year, the violation of how many students are allowed in a classroom, not just by contract, but by square footage. Each child in a classroom has to have so many square feet according to their age. When you load a class up with 35 kids in a classroom at a high school, the square footage is thrown out the window. So you're not only going to violate contract, education code, fire marshal codes, all those kind of things come into play. The representative says, I didn't know we had all that. He says, why don't you have more teachers? I says, how do you have teachers when we have $5,040 per ADA is what we're calculating out for next year? And he goes, well, you can't operate like that. And I go, this is what we've been trying to say all along. He said, we stood out in the street. It was the same day that we had out there. I says, I was out on the street with the staff in front of a school that we already, as a backdrop, that we've already closed. Well, he took his notes down. He's going to take them back up and tell them that the small school districts and other school districts are not being affected the same way as they are in the large school districts. He talked about, well, the administration, it's at 20%, and I go, our administrators, not counting psychologists, we're down to 4%, where we were at 8%. The teachers have dropped, I thought it was 12%, Jim, you said 14%, since over the past years. He says, he didn't have those numbers. All they're seeing is that the administrative staff, the teaching certificated staff, the classified never came into the picture, and I asked him that also. He didn't have an answer. How can we correlate our district with LA Unified, who he says there are 3 floors of a big, huge building of nothing but administrators? And I go, why? I mean, if we can do it with 4%, why do they have to have 20-something%? And what are their teachers doing in the classified? So I'm waiting for a response back from that, and I'll be meeting with them. And he says, I may, as I told you before, hopefully I'll get invited to go up there, and if I do, one of the board members I said would be coming with me, just to express our needs in this community. On that note, it was a revelation last week. I don't think, I appreciate RTA and CSCA letting me join them on the line. Very often I don't think administrators have that opportunity to express their feelings, as I know the board members express their feelings. But we are going to get some hard times, and we need to all express the feelings together. The criteria, March 15th deadline, yes, we have to meet that deadline. It doesn't mean that, as we know, that the people that are on layoffs, that they're going to stay there. They can come back at any time. But timelines prohibit. We had to focus on the certificated and administration because that's the time frame we were in. Everything else is now we're going to look at. Charlene, at my request and the board's request, was putting together the numbers and the figures of where can we cut $1.6 million. How do we do it? Well, we have to still remember, when you have 83 to 86% of the budget that is in personnel, 1.6 million is not going to be covered by any other part of it. And all of it that's going to be in there, the majority of it that's going to be in there, is all negotiable. Tonight's meeting is for us to look at these numbers and to get some direction, if there is direction, that we have to go back to the bargaining table with both groups, because it affects them not only financially, but also everything else that deals with the bargaining agreements. So we want to go over the numbers see where they are, so everybody can get the same figures, so we can sit down and figure out how we're going to cut this out. It is hoped that the union groups, when we sit down with them, we can figure out how to do it and present it back to you, the board. Because we cannot violate the restrictive nature of the bargaining agreement. And restrictive is a good word because it protects not only the district but also the bargaining groups. But everything comes out of there. So it's got to be dealt with there and back here for us to review and get your advice on. So with that, Charlene, and poor Charlene has had a wave of illness.